I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer at Gold Derby, joined today by 13-time Emmy nominee and 3-time winner Alexa Fogel, the casting director of Ozark. Alexa, to kick things off, I would like to focus on your collaboration with Chris Mundy and Jason Bateman and just ask what that process was like before each season. You know, at what point during pre-productions did conversations regarding casting begin, and how much were you always given in terms of scripts and character arcs before you'd actually start your work?
Good morning. I would say that in my extremely lengthy career that it's probably the simplest collaboration I've ever had in the best possible way. In that it was only really the three of us having conversations and making decisions and then getting everybody approved that we wanted very easily. At the beginning of the season, Chris would, because you know, each season of Ozark is almost like starting over because you kill so many people that you have these huge new characters that are going to carry big arcs. So Chris would usually, you know, would have already been talking to Jason about that, would explain all of that to me, and then we would just begin that process, whether it's presenting them with ideas or reading actors as soon as there was material.
That's very interesting. And of course, you didn't have to do all the work by yourself. You had a lot of collaborators, including Chase Paris and Tara Feldstein, who were responsible for a lot of the local casting. So could you elaborate a bit on what that collaboration looked like, considering you were New York based and they were scouting, I believe, within a 100-mile radius from Atlanta?
Right. So it's myself and Catherine Zamora Benson, who's the associate on the show, doing sort of everything LA, Chicago, New York. And Chase and Tara and I have worked together on lots of projects, and they have great taste. And there's a really wonderful pool of actors in the Southeast who they know. And I think that it becomes clear when you've done this for a while what doesn't make sense to bring from far away, particularly during COVID in this last season. I think that we work with the same eye, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And so the tone of whatever we're working on, but in this case, Ozark, is consistent.
That's very interesting. And you already mentioned the pandemic, and we can't talk about season 4 specifically without mentioning the pandemic and how it amended the entire casting process. Obviously, the auditions had to be done over Zoom, but what are some of the other challenges that arose, especially with respect to casting locals and non-series regulars who had to be hired or have to be hired for each new episode?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge for every production during COVID, particularly if people have to travel for it, is that you need to hire them well enough in advance to be able to test and quarantine, depending on what stage of the pandemic we were in. And that can be, you're already under a pretty tight schedule pressure-wise. And the schedule of any show like Ozark is going to be constantly changing, whether it's because of weather or location availabilities. And so you're constantly having to reroute that anyway. So the added pressure of an additional week was tough. It's a big show, and there are a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely. And then this season, it was not just a big season in general. It was 14 episodes that was, you know, was split into 2 parts for us viewers, but it was 14 episodes that you worked on. So that must have added to everything else, to all the other pressure and difficulties of working during the pandemic.
I mean, I would say yes, in that we worked on it for a year, but I would say the flip side of that is that it's the greatest job ever, and you could do it forever if somebody let you.
Well, that's always great to hear. And to get into some of the specific casting for season 4, I would like to first highlight the Alessandros, beginning with the casting of Alfonso Herrera as Javi Alessandro. I read that Alfonso, who of course auditioned on Zoom, landed the role rather quickly. So what did he bring to the table that made him such an instantly perfect fit for the part?
He's so, you know, there's a really important component of how to be on Ozark, because there's so many outrageous things that take place, but the style has to be completely naturalistic. and to bring charm and menace and
Exactly.
just the right level of accent to that character. He's just very comfortable with the environment he's in. And I knew his work, obviously, from other things I'd seen him in, but yeah, he just had that particular charm and menace, and in a very natural setting.
Definitely, and Charm and Menace is exactly what I was actually going to mention, because I love how he created them with equal amount of menace and charm, and how the charm somehow only intensified his menacing presence, and it was such a joy to watch him in this role. And then, of course, there's also Camilla Alessandro, played by Veronica Falcon, who was actually on another show with Alfonso, Queen of the South. And as a viewer, what immediately struck me was Veronica's unwavering, spine-chilling screen presence. Was that something that also struck you during her audition, or what were you specifically looking for when casting this part?
You know, in that case, I had very little material,
Oh,
so I only had the idea of what she would become from Chris. And he was already cast, so when she and I met on Zoom to read, she's the one actually who reminded me that they knew each other and had worked together.
Hmm.
You know, I can't say for sure. Sometimes these things just become clear during the process.
Right.
She's clearly a wonderful and experienced actress, and I think they just felt like a good fit.
And they absolutely were. And I honestly believe that ultimately, obviously this is just my opinion, but that she is the most frightening antagonist, quote unquote antagonist, of the entire series. I mean, just that scene opposite Katrina Lenk in the series finale alone, that was just incredible to watch. And that is a perfect.
Her last scene with Felix, I think, is absolutely chilling.
That as well. She just added such a great presence to the show, and I feel like the moment she would walk on screen, she just filled the screen with her presence. And speaking of Katrina Lenk, she also joined this season as Clare Shaw, the CEO of Shaw Medical Solutions, a prominent Chicago-based pharmaceutical company. What I loved about Katrina's work was her ability to react to certain situations and convey so much with her face and her eyes, the scene in the finale being a prime example. Again, is that something you were specifically looking for here, or what made you ultimately land on Katrina?
I mean, there's a very deep bench of great New York theater actors in this cast, and in a lot of things that I do. I think that it was just more that it could be surprising to an audience, because she hasn't really played, you know, on a big stage like this kind of character. And I think that that's part of what we do well on this show, is we show you a different side of actors you may have seen in other things. And I think that that's because we all believe that, you know, good actors have range and,
Yep.
you know, can use a lot of different muscles.
Absolutely, and that's perfect for the next question, because last season we obviously saw the addition of Wendy's brother, Ben Davis, played by the amazing Tom Pelphrey, and this year we get to meet her estranged father, Nathan Davis, played by the incredible Richard Thomas. So how did you get Richard? Did he audition, or how else did he board the series?
Oh, he didn't. I don't think he auditioned.
Right.
You know, he and Laura have a lot of history in the theater. And I thought, you know, we all talked about this. It would be great to bring somebody in where there was a relationship already between the actors, because of what they had to build in such a short amount of time. And we've heard about this character over the years. I mean, that was also true. It was a big consideration when we cast Tom Pelphrey. How, for me, the trick of that was to believe that they were siblings.
Right.
And that's really difficult to do. But in terms of Richard, I think that it just made sense for the two of them to do this together. I mean, there are other actors, obviously wonderful actors, who might have also been good, but his I don't want to use the word menace again. his incredible judgment, and it just, their scenes together were electric. I love them.
Absolutely. And he really fit into the Ozark world perfectly. And he and Laura have such a specific father-son dynamic, and their scenes were just riveting to watch. And I think this is an interesting place to mention that you, as you kind of touched on briefly, don't necessarily do chemistry reads or haven't done so in your career, that you really, in a way, presuppose that actors have this ability to create chemistry if need be. Is this an approach that you have always used, or one that has resulted from the experience of doing it the other way around?
I don't think it's a philosophy. I think it's
Mhm.
just that I'm not insecure about the choices that we make. And I think that sometimes when you don't do what I do every day, which is work with actors every day, all day, you feel like you need to see people together. Sometimes it's because you need to physically see them if you're a
Right.
director or writer, and sometimes it's um, because you don't spend as much time with actors as I do, and
Yeah.
you're not entirely sure about until you see it.
Absolutely. And obviously, there were so many other additions to the fourth season about whom we can't necessarily go into detail because of time. There's Adam Rothenberg as Mel, there's Bruce Davison as Senator Randall Schaefer, and so many more. Is there anything or any casting choice in particular for the fourth season that you would like to specifically highlight before we move on?
Oh, I was thrilled with Adam Rothenberg.
Mhm.
It's not the first time that I've cast him in something, but again, that is one of those roles that is particularly difficult because if you go too far in one direction, you're going to be sort of twirling your villainous whiskers. And to be that naturalistic and curious and kind of there all the time is, I thought he did such a beautiful job.
He really did, and once again, that final scene is just it's such a great scene, and it turned out so well. And I think it works so well because all of those actors also play off of each other. So, well, as you said, it comes from the process that everyone is supposed to act naturalistic, and I really think that helped the show. And a scene like this, where you really needed all the notes to be there and everything to sort of work. And you have talked about how it was the writing that initially drew you into Ozark or to working on the show. And even though these characters were rich from the get-go, I feel as though they've only become richer and more complex with each new season. So how was it for you watching these actors then that you cast evolve and thrive in these roles and have them and the show ultimately stick the landing?
You know, I have high expectations, and often they are satisfied. And in this case, I mean, Chris is so incredible with story and character. And as I think, which is true on many good and successful shows, as you get to know actors, you can sort of write towards that. But it's thrilling. I mean, it's work at a very high level, and incredibly watchable and very moving and very scary all at the same time.
And uh, is you've obviously had a great career, but is there anything that you feel you learned about casting, or maybe even on a personal level, from having worked on this show with all these people for, I believe it was 5 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something I suppose I learned, but it was a great experience to really understand that the less people making the decisions, the better the decisions can be, and the easier the
Interesting.
process is.
That's very interesting, but it makes sense, I guess, right? Because you can have
I
more
mean, if you're
intimate.
lucky enough, as I was, to have collaborators like Jason and Chris, we all care so much about acting and story. So we're speaking a common language together.
Absolutely, and obviously there's so much other stuff that you're working on. There's certainly Atlanta, which finally returned after 4 years, and but I actually want to talk about or briefly mention We Own This City, the new HBO miniseries, and ask how it was reteaming with your longtime collaborator David Simon.
David Simon, George Pelicanos, Nina
Mhm.
Noble. I've been working with them pretty steadily for 20 years.
Yeah,
So it really feels like home base.
and on a final note, like I mentioned earlier, you've been nominated for a gazillion Emmys, including two for Ozark and one 3 times for True Detective and twice for NYPD Blue. How has it felt to be invited back and be recognized by your peers so many times throughout your career now?
I mean, it's the highest compliment you can get if you're getting it from people who really truly understand what you do. And I have lost a lot more than I have won. But it's you know, it's thrilling and moving.
Yeah, but 3 wins are still incredible. And you know, best of luck this year, of course, once again, and congratulations on a final season, on such an amazing final season of Ozark. It was such a pleasure to speak to you today, Alexa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.